Absolutely. And I think what I'm wanting to talk about is only going to be solved when we put Jesus back in the center of our community. So I can't wait to kind of jump into that. But I better lead us in prayer tonight, since
Please.
the bishop, I know, is praying for us somewhere
Yeah, yeah.
else, but we need it right here in this room. Lord, we love you, and we are so thankful for you. We're thankful for what you're doing, how you're moving, and what you've got in store for us, Lord. We pray for revival for this city, for this state, for this country, for this world, Lord. There is no more moment that I can remember in my lifetime than right now that we need you most, Lord. I pray that you'll show up and show out in a big way tonight. In your name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
And as always, I like to kind of kick things off with the why we do what we do, why we talk about what we're talking about, and starts off with the hungry. Arkansas is the hungriest state in America right now. It's summer. Our kids are out of school. Nearly 500,000 kids in Arkansas don't know where their next meal is coming from unless we as a people step in. It's about the widow. The United States has the world's highest rate of children living in single parent households. And when we talk about the widow, we got a problem with men fleeing their responsibilities and leaving women in a lurch. It's about the orphan, over 391,000 children in the U.S. living in the foster care system, nearly 4,000 of them right here in Arkansas. It's about poverty, 38 million Americans living in poverty, with the majority of them being children of color. Right now in Arkansas, our schools claim about 17,000 kids that are virtually homeless in our schools. It's about addiction. Over half of the people 12 years and older have used illicit drugs. Over 40,000 people die in the U.S. every year from overdosing. It's about the prisoner. The U.S. leads the world in the total number of incarcerations, with more than 2 million people. 2 million people that are not adding value to our society, that are just sitting there because they've committed some sort of crime that has had, as Coach always calls, that multiplier effect of bringing our society down as a whole, not just the one person they impacted, but multiple people. And then
The grenade.
the grenade that goes off and just devastates our country. And at Every Arkansan, our vision is to see more people chasing their God-given dreams. And far too often those dreams are sidelined because of the zip code you're born in more than anything else. And we're blessed to be able to host First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill, because all these facts I just mentioned are contributing factors to one that we have to change. And that is the number one cause of death for a black male, 0 to 44, is homicide. It's not car accidents, not cancer, not heart disease. It is intentional homicide out there, guys. This is an epidemic that is taking our young men away from us, incarcerating another generation. And the only way we're going to see things changed is through revival in our land. So we want to just kind of kick things off tonight. And Coach, I'm going to talk about one of your favorite subjects here, that I think is oftentimes overlooked as this link between violence, is teenage pregnancy.
But, hey, Blake, I gave him our Every Arkansan Recovery leader. He asked me about that last week, and I said the evidence is so overwhelming that understanding the sin of sexual immorality and the effects that it has on access to opportunities.
Absolutely.
I mean, and it's over and over again. And I'm saying it's amazing of how that is tied up into. I was just looking at what's going on with P. Diddy, all the things that are tied into a feeling. You said, because that's an addiction.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and so now when you look at this pornography, when you look at the social media piece and this fan, all these things where Satan has a very, very has a lot of access to our children and to the adults, and young and old, and the effects of it on the brain. What research shows is detrimental.
Well, and it builds. It's not this sexual perversion that is kind of sweeping our world. It just is getting worse and worse, and building and building. And I think when we look at the headlines, we don't hear the mention of teenage pregnancy, but it shapes the lives, the homes, the communities all across our country. Teenage pregnancy and its connection to teenage violence is overlooked, because I think we're looking at, oh, well, this is the problem.
Mhm.
Well, this is the result.
Yep.
In the U.S., Black teens have the highest pregnancy rate of any racial group, 27.5 pregnancies per 1,000 teen girls. That's nearly double the national average, according to the CDC. More than 70% of these births occur outside of a two-parent household.
Mhm.
Children born to teen moms are 3 times more likely to be incarcerated by the age of 30.
So let me give you an example, because because I was in my last edition of First and 45,
Right.
and so understanding, when I went in and I interviewed 9 of 16 youth that were charged for violent crimes in Little Rock in 2024, okay, in the early 2024, and I did the A study and looking at their background. I vividly remember the 14-year-old young youth who was in there for attempted murder. Okay, 14 now. Okay, so I was just asking, to your point, to substantiate what you're saying. I said, I asked him how old. He's 14, and I asked him, who do you miss the most? And he said, my mother. Now he's 14. And I said, okay, well, how old is your mother? He said, 30. All right. Then I say, how many siblings do you have? He said 6. Now, all of that, as I'm just playing out, and I had somebody record, and so everybody just looking. So that's, you're building a profile of a young traumatic kid that does not have what God intended for him to have in a two-parent home that has a provider, a protector, and a pastor within a father, has a mother, a nurturer, a lover, and an encourager as a mother to give, because we all bring something different to the table. And when you don't have that father, and, you have a community of people, which when I lost, my father, I had uncles and people, the village, to step in and do that. But this oftentimes doesn't happen in this cycle of dysfunctionalism that you're talking about.
I mean, it's driving a car and missing a wheel.
No question.
I mean, it all the parts just aren't there. You might get somewhere, but you're not going to get there the way it was intended.
No, not at all.
But teen mothers are more likely to live in poverty, increasing exposure to environments where violence becomes normalized. Only 38% of teen mothers graduate high school, leaving fewer paths to break the generational cycle down the road. I mean, we look at right now with what you've been working on at Arkansas Baptist, and Arkansas Baptist has a GED program right there. So you didn't graduate high school, there's an on-ramp. But if you show up at that on-ramp and you've got a baby in your arms, it's just incrementally more difficult to get there. And I think that's the thing when we look at this. It's not a death sentence, but it is definitely should be a wake up to us that we've got to show up in a different way.
Correct.
And these aren't just statistics. These are stress points in our communities that echo through every neighborhood, school, street corner. When we talk about the homicide crisis, we have to zoom out and look at what's happening before those bullets start flying. And for so many of these young kids, it's just like what you were saying. The statistics tell us it was a teenage parent. And here's what we know. A teenager who becomes a parent is suddenly thrust into adult responsibilities with no blueprint, no resources, and oftentimes no support. Because this is usually multi-generational.
I was in California talking to my partner who runs a foster care program there. And so we were talking about this, and he submitted some articles for me on foster care for firstand45.com. And I'm really excited about the next edition coming out next month, the First and 45 that I've been working on for quite some time. But here's what he told me. He said, in talking to the young teenage mothers who were in foster care that were pregnant, and started asking them, really, do you understand the consequences of having a teenage baby, and how that really hinders your opportunity to have mobility to pursue opportunities. And he said that what he found with his teenage mothers in foster care, that getting pregnant was something that they desired because they wanted somebody to love.
Mm.
And so
Talk about trying to fill that
that's
God-shaped hole in
that's
their
exactly,
heart with
yep.
something else.
Because nobody would love, so they wanted, so
Mhm.
that baby is something that they could have to love. And so that really made you start thinking, we desire love.
Mhm.
We all do, to be loved.
Yep.
So if you've been from a foster care home to foster care home, you feel like that you're not being cared for, and you want to express that feeling. So if you have in your mind, you have a baby, I'm going to love this child like I've never been loved, but you're caught up into your feelings and not thinking about all the responsibility
Mhm.
that comes into feeding, clothing, all
Oh,
the things that
yeah.
we talk about that's difficult,
Mhm.
that a 15, 16-year-old is not supposed to be having to do by herself.
No, and nor do they know how
Right.
to do those things. I mean, Proverbs 29:15 says, "A child left to himself brings shame to his mother." But what happens when the mother, she's a child herself?
Correct.
I mean, and so I was reading some real life examples of this. In Baltimore, 17-year-old girl gave birth, dropped out of school. Okay, makes sense. Statistics tell us that's going to happen. With no job, no diploma, she relied on a boyfriend who was relying upon the streets for his money. That relationship soon turned violent. Her child, who is now 7, is already in trouble for showing signs of aggression at school. These things aren't just things that are happening to teenagers. 7. The fruits of this are manifesting in the wrong way with these young children. This isn't isolated. It becomes systemic. Teen parenthood increases the odds of trauma, neglect, youth exposure to violence, and those odds are multiplied as we add generations. So when you look at it, mom at 13, grandmother at 26, great grandmother at 39, I mean, we see it all the time. So many of our kids graduate and they start visiting the clubs with their mothers and grandmothers. Hey,
Yes, sir.
they don't.
Exactly right.
So we've got to stop pretending these issues are separate. Teen pregnancy, dropout rates, fatherlessness, youth homicide are all threads of this same web. Deuteronomy 6:6 through 7 tells us these commandments are to be on your heart. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home. But if the parents or teens who are pouring wisdom into who's pouring wisdom into them, it's like if we were to take a 7-year-old or a 10-year-old kid and say, okay, we need you to be the wise one for this family. You say, man, that's just stupid. But that's what we're doing when we got teenage pregnancy, babies leading babies. So, hey guys, it is into the first quarter. We're talking about teenage pregnancy. We're talking about what happens to our society when we give up the morals that God created us to do and the commandments He told us to follow. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. Hey guys, Drew here, and for the last 11 years, we've worked together to build the Arkansas Dream Center. And over those years, things have grown, opportunities have happened, but we've continued to focus on that mission of every Arkansan chasing their God given dream. And for that very reason, our corporation is actually known as Every Arkansan Inc. We have 2 ministries that really work together in tandem to see that mission take place. We have the Arkansas Dream Center, which is going out and we're reaching out to the communities. We're in those communities with mobile trucks. We're doing after school, we're feeding, we're doing all those things you know us for doing. But in addition, we realize that the church is the answer to a lot of society's problems, and there's one on every corner. So we have City Serve that comes along the side of the church, and they provide the resources. They provide furniture and clothing and diapers and all these things to the local churches so they can reach out to their neighbors. And together, when those two start to mesh, we're going out and we're bringing the churches alongside of them, and we're equipping and we're resourcing those churches. We can truly empower the local church with the resources they need to strengthen relationships in their communities. And that's what our vision is for Every Arkansan Inc. And we're so glad you're a part of it. All right. Good evening and welcome back to First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. I'm Dean Davis. Bishop is out doing the revival of the city, and we are holding down the fort here in the studio. We've been talking about teenage pregnancy, and we're diving into this connection between teen pregnancy, youth violence. In the first half, we kind of laid down some heavy truths, some facts, some things, but now I want to kind of shift gears and let's talk about some solutions.
Right.
First, relationship-based education matters. Programs, there's one in Crittenden that they report that when teenage girls receive mentoring and support, less than 2% of them become pregnant compared to the national average of 13%. So who you are around, the influencers that are in your life matters. It's not a curriculum shift, it's a community shift. And that's something we have to be instilling in our young people. The problem isn't just sex education, it's value education. 1 Corinthians 6:19 says, do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit? Our teens are being told what not to do, but not told who they are.
Correct.
And we were dealing with a situation. Special K came to us today about a young man. He's now 17, but when he was 12, he started having sex and ended up criminal charges came out of it and some other things because everyone was so young involved. This kid at now 17 has got a criminal situation going on because someone wasn't there to say, look, these urges are real, but man, this is what God says about we gotta take hold of these urges, take hold of these temptations.
And Drew, and I don't want to cut you off there because, and then what research shows, because we have to understand this in being in therapy and going through experience and looking at, all the things that take place when a person is trying to become emotionally healthy, is that when you see a 12-year-old, and this is kind of like the same thing when I say a person shooting a gun, at 14 or 15, that just didn't happen in one day.
No.
Okay. That was something that has been festering for quite some time, because you just don't become a person who I want to take somebody's life, at 15 years old. So there's a lot of things that goes, and Turtle talked about that, in being in his, not having a father, not the things that how raising his sisters, but all of he's a parent. I'm a child being a parent. And so I think that it's important to understand when these 12-year-olds are inquisitive and have these urges, it usually comes from an experience that they had.
Yes.
Because they have been exposed.
Exactly.
And so you have to understand trauma from the effect, because a person who haven't been exposed to these feelings don't know what they're feeling. And so now you have to look back and say, well, why, because what you learn is that a person who's desiring or seeking something has, in most cases, and there are anomalies, but is something that they have been exposed to, which has triggered this behavior. And so it's just like a violent behavior of a young person doesn't just happen, in 24 hours. It's been something that has been under the surface, festering for quite some time. So there's trauma involved. So then in the book, Bleeding Out, it says that, it's so interesting in this book and talking about violence, it says that in most cases, what the research shows, the person who would pull the trigger was a person who came out of foster care that was detached. And it said that when they're sitting around in the gang, somebody will say, this person needs to be shot. We need to take this person out. Everybody in the gang is not a shooter.
Right.
Okay. So you only have certain detached people that will pull the trigger. Now everybody, is in that room. If you're in that car, you're gonna be charged. That's the hand grenade.
Right.
But you can sit there and say, I didn't shoot him, but you were with him, so you're gonna be charged, and then you may can get out early if you testify against him to say he was a trigger puller. But everybody's not a trigger puller. So, but it says that what they said, the foster care, just like my friend was telling me about the young ladies, but the boys are looking for affirmation and validation.
Mm-hmm.
So in that group of people, they want to be affirmed, to be something, that a void that they're trying to fill. And we see that over and over and over in teens who make bad decisions.
Yes. I mean, when boys grow up without seeing a responsible father in their world, it's no surprise that they repeat a cycle.
Right.
I mean, in a 2021 study from the Brookings Institute found that boys born to teen moms are twice as likely to be incarcerated by their late teens.
Yep.
When you talk about boys in the hood, you look at the dichotomy of the one gentleman that had a father.
That's it. Made it out.
That he had because you aren't just born with a mom or a dad. You're born with both.
Mm-hmm.
That's how biology kind of works on it. But when one piece is missing, it's like, who am I? How do I grow up? And that's the role of the father.
Yep.
Can't be I did my part, I'm going on my merry way. They've got to be engaged. The mom's got to be engaged, because that's the only way it's working. There's a young man in Memphis who became a father at 16. And through mentorship at his local church, he went back to school. He got a trade license, is now raising a daughter with stability and purpose. And he says, somebody believed in me before I believed in myself.
Yep.
And that's the role of the local church. That's the role we've all got to play in society if we want to see a difference. And it's really discipleship.
Yeah.
And discipleship is prevention. Psalm 127:3 says, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. You and I both talk about the joys of parenthood, but there's a whole lot of responsibilities of parenthood.
It's hard, bro.
And I mean, you're at the point now to where your last goose is leaving the nest, so to speak.
That's right.
With Jews, I've got a 14-year-old. But when you look at it, it doesn't stop even when they leave the nest.
No. My daughter's exactly right. I mean, there's something, but that's parenting.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And that's what we're called to do. And and that's who, that's your heartbeats. And so that's what you want to do. But just imagine those individuals who never had that opportunity to be exposed to that connectivity as God intended for it to be.
I mean, when children are raising children, that heritage becomes burdened with trauma and poverty and violence and everything else that we talk about on the regular.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was talking to some of my staff earlier today, a lot of hopelessness, because when you get trapped in government housing, a government check, I mean, you're told, well, you don't have the education. You can't go back and get the education. Well, you've got all of a sudden these burdens start holding you down, and the hope and the dreams of a better future, they go out the window.
Correct.
You don't have anything. And I mean, when we get more practical in a lot of this stuff, man, we talk all the time. Churches, it's these VBSs that are going on with these young kids. It's youth nights that are going on. A lot of these things churches have stopped. I mean,
I grew up vacation Bible school for 3 weeks.
Yep.
And
that was in between Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Right, I mean, there was all this going on. But schools, I mean, they're missing the point of life skills and mentorship. It's testing for math, testing for science, but there's so much more to life than just what you can learn in a book. There's the life skills that we've got to make sure that we're instilling in them. In our cities, I mean, we've got to look at where we're investing our dollars. I mean, wrap around, addressing some of our housing issues, childcare. Have you seen the price of childcare lately?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't imagine, because I know when I was paying for it.
Marius was talking about it's cheaper for his kid to go to private school than it is preschool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so expensive out there. But also looking at educating our teen parents. I mean, you want them to raise successful people. They ain't gonna raise nothing when they've got nothing to support them. And the big thing is that we as a society have got to have a heart for it. We've got to have a heart for these kids. Titus 2:6-7 says, encourage the young men to be self-controlled in everything. Set them an example by doing what is good. The only way we stop the next generation from falling into this sin is to walk beside them with patience, truth, and love. And all too often we walk beside them and say, oh, that's just too bad. And then we walk away. We talk about being pro-life, but are we pro-life the whole gamut? Not just at conception, but at birth, at middle school, at elementary school, at high school, all these transition points where our kids fall off the rails.
Correct.
We've got to be there. Teenage pregnancy isn't just a reproductive issue, it's a violence prevention issue, a faith issue, a community survival issue. We've got to choose to invest in our young people before they become just another headline. If you look at Jacksonville, they closed a cold case, and it was showing 16 years ago this gentleman shot this young woman, and I'm looking at this gentleman, I'm like, man, this guy couldn't have been very old when he pulled the trigger 16 years ago. This isn't a problem that is just happening today. This has been going on for the last couple of decades. And if we don't do something to turn off this faucet, we're going to wake up in another 2 decades and say, man, this is worse than it was before.
No question.
The family's dissolved. We need to build more prison beds. And it doesn't just stop. It only stops when we intervene, when we act. I look at the first Persian Gulf War, which you fought in. Saddam Hussein was marching around, killing people, doing things that we thought would stop after that war, but it didn't, because that sin was still in the house and it was still crouching. It took going in there and taking out that sin and killing that sin, cutting it off before we broke the cycle. When we look at this, and if we're not willing to go in there and break this cycle and teach young men what it is to be young men and young women their values, man, we're going to wake up 20 years. It's just going to be the same. Same thing.
Because we have to address this at the root of the problem.
And I mean, I heard a quote and it says, we can't heal what we won't face.
No question.
And when we look at this is a sin issue. We want to this is a sin issue.
Yep.
This
100%.
is a heart issue. This is the only solution being when we get right with Jesus.
Correct.
And when we disciple people and we teach them the truth. And that's I'm so excited about this path that you've been on recently of okay, we've got another chance at these young men.
No question.
How are we going to come in? And we got a lot of things going on in the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months that I'm excited about, because we're not just talking. We're taking action.
Getting in the game, baby. Trying to make some plays. When we talk about 1st and 45, we're truly trying to get our young men to 45 where they can become grandparents and then give back to their youth and communities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey guys, this is 1st and 45. It's the end of the first half, but you don't want to go anywhere because Coach is going to be back right after this break.
Black men have so many different problems, so many different issues. Homicide rate, high incarceration rate, fatherless homes. What is America going to do about it?
What are we going to do about it? Yeah, what are we going to do about it? When I say we, I'm talking to black men. I'm asking us, what are we going to do about issues that negatively impact black men and boys to a greater degree than other demographics? Everybody knows about the homicide epidemic in this country regarding black men and boys. While comprising only 6% of the nation's population, will account for 50% of the nation's homicide victims. So what are we going to do about it? Here's another disturbing reality. While making up only 6% of the nation's population, we're about 40% of the nation's prison population. In fact, 1 in 3 black males are projected to go to jail in their lifetime. Again, I ask, what are we going to do about it? Collectively, black men have the means to solve these problems. We just don't have the mind to do so. And means without the mind is meaningless. Brother, it doesn't mean a thing.
All right, and we are back with 1st and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. It is the beginning of the second half, Coach, and the part of the game where you take the reins and tell us what's on your heart.
Hey, a couple things that I want to talk about, but I'm gonna continue to echo on the piggyback on the teenage pregnancy. But Stephen A. Smith, which he love him or hate him, ESPN First Take, was talking about Memphis, and he talking about the NBA and why he said that it's probably hard for some players to want to go play for the Memphis Grizzlies because that per capita, I think Memphis was number one in the homicide, and then Memphis. So they did an interview. They went down and talked to people on Beale Street and people local, and they rebuked him for saying that about Memphis, and he got back on. And it's kind of like what he said. He said, "What the numbers say?" He said, "I didn't make this up." He said, I'm holding to what the facts say, that Memphis is one of the most dangerous cities, downtown, in the things that happen. But I really thought about it. It goes back to our point, Drew, what we always says, that in certain places, even in Little Rock, it's very safe. And in very places it's not safe.
Yep.
And that's just like Memphis. You know what I'm saying? So the people, the security for certain areas is up at all-time high. So because tourism, investment dollars, economic, money's coming in communities, you're going to have a lot of security and a lot of things going on. Then in other places where we're talking about impoverished community, high teenage pregnant, all the things that we're looking for, these factors, is where you will find the violence.
Right.
And so I that just really, because people are easy to defend. Our cities are not dangerous, but then but you go back and look and say, well, what does the fact say? And that's why we do First and 45, and that's why we try to bring this black male homicide epidemic to light, because you can't fix this if you do not address the issues that are rooted in the statistics that we talk about. So and what.
But I mean, Coach, I think that goes back to and I was trying to pull up the statistic really quickly, but it's like if you pull out like the 100 most dangerous zip codes out of the country, we become one of the safest countries versus one of the most dangerous countries. We're talking micro-targeting communities,
no question,
in order to figure out where our problems are.
If we were going to combat right now, if I'm sitting there and we're deciding what's the most dangerous and where to go in, if we're trying to take over, you're not going to be going to these places where there is where violence almost non-existent. And that's what I want to go to on our state map. But before I do that, because many people don't realize that this crisis has not always been this way. And I want to share some stats from First and 45 from our last edition, where I talks about in 1940, the out of wedlock birth rate was 19% among Black families. Now just think about that. Okay, in 1940s. Okay, in 1965, but then we start seeing a trend. The out of wedlock birth rate among Black families increased to 25%. All right, so you had in 25 years, you had a 6 percentage point increase. Well, you look back nearly 35 years later, okay, in 1991. So what happened between 1965 and 1991 that the out of wedlock birth rate has soared to 68% for Black families? So you go from 1940 to 19% to 1991 to 68%. And then as the last census, as recently as 2015, nearly 10 years ago, it was reported that over 70% of Black children in America were born out of wedlock. This was the highest of any native-born ethnicity among American citizens. So now, if as a football coach, we said, well, what's going on? So now we started going back to look at what changed this dynamic when Black families, historically prior to the 1970s, married more than white couples. Okay, and you saw where our families were intact. Only less than 20% were children were not born to two-parent homes in the 1940s going there. So what I did, looking at this, taking Arkansas into consideration of how this is impacting our state, I looked at the counties, okay, with the highest number of black male homicides in Arkansas in the 21st century, since 2000 to 2023. Now, so just looking at this number and say, okay, what counties had the highest number? All right. Well, of course, now listen to this. Pulaski County, okay, which is 37, nearly 38% black, all right, had 987 black males murdered in Little Rock and North Little Rock in Pulaski County. All right, that was the highest. But and here's what it was on top. But that if you look in per capita, because of the population numbers, it wouldn't register as per capita as the highest. But now, if you go here and you look at, okay, say Fitz, what counties have the highest teenage pregnancy rate in correlation with the highest homicide rate? So if you look at and you'll see West Memphis, West Helena had 8.2% teenage pregnancy and had 114 black males murdered in its county during the same period of time. Crittenden County, all right, that's West Memphis, okay, had the third highest black males murdered in Arkansas with 158. Okay, so now you're looking at Helena, West Helena, which had 114, which was at the bottom of 5. Then you go back Mississippi County, which is Blytheville. Okay, had 6.6 teenage pregnancy, had 132 black males murdered. West Memphis was third on the list with 158 black males murdered, and West Memphis had a 7.1% teenage pregnancy rate. Then you go to Jefferson County, okay, Pine Bluff, it had a 5.5% teenage pregnancy rate, and it had 339 black males murdered. So now, if you look at that number, and you can start seeing, I'm saying this to the correlation of what you're talking about, strictly the facts, is that as that number continues to rise, then that's where your violence comes from, because it supports what you were talking about. So there were 5 other counties with high teenage pregnancies. They were Nevada County, which is Prescott. They had a 7.3% teenage pregnancy. Hope, Hempstead County, 7.1. St. Francis, Forest City, Lake Village, 6.6, and Augusta, 6.2. So when you look at this, you will see why in the Delta and in impoverished areas that we call are Helena, West Memphis, Blytheville, Pine Bluff, Forest City, Lake Village, Augusta. If you start looking at those hot spots on how this impoverished, oftentimes teenage pregnancy, and how this has been a pipeline to prison per se, because these individuals actually don't have the opportunities. And that's why that statistic says that only 5%, okay, what it says, a black male born to a teenage mother in poverty has a 50% chance of going to prison upon conception. That's where this data comes from. All right. So now, because for every one of these black males that you look here to see that's murdered, the data tells us on average that you're going to charge 2.5 other black males, which 85 to 90% of those will be black men, which then with a 65% arrest and prosecution rate, that those are going to prison, which it leads to why we have to build another prison here, because our counties that we're talking about in the Delta, all right, which, by the way, as we build prisons in those impoverished areas, what we're saying, those are job creation institutions that help for those impoverished counties. I thought it was interesting. I was on the radio in Pine Bluff last year, And I was told, I don't know this to be true, but the person I trust said it, said that prior to, the 2000, that education, that the Black teachers were the number one degrees awarded at UAPB in Pine Bluff. Now criminal justice and working into the promotion is now to go work in the criminal justice system, because the prison population has grown so comparatively, where the education model has decreased. And so if you just think about how
we I think missed the boat on realizing that our incarceration rates are an economic stimulus
no question,
in impoverished communities. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it's, where are these prisons going?
Correct.
What jobs are being created in communities that no one else is going to? I mean, you look at Forest City is a great example. I mean, it's the federal prison there has been a huge stimulus to an otherwise, unstimulated financially county. And when we look at this, it's like, how in the world do you sell this? Well, you sell it as an economic stimulus.
Correct.
Not the imprisonment or incarceration game and all that. But when we look at it on a national scale, we're in the hundreds of billions of dollars in this industry, lots of jobs, lots of opportunities. And I think when you start talking about, we used to be teachers and now we're talking about justice, we've missed the boat, because we've now said, okay, forget the guardrail. We're going to the bottom of the cliff to start building our hospital versus preventing the kids from going off the cliff.
And also, I remember being in Atlanta one night after Justice basketball game, and I walked out of the arena and I looked up at the map and it says high paying jobs for security guards, $85,000. I'm saying, these are you want steady employment. So what we're saying is that, see, once you build and listen, we all want safe communities. So nobody's in disagreement with that. So yes. And what we're saying is that because we have failed in the development of our children as intended by God, is why we are having to build prisons. And see, once you build a prison, that's like building a school. That's a permanent infrastructure. Unlike a school today that you can go to school online, you can't go to prison virtually.
Nope.
Okay. So now if you build it, you have to fill it.
Yep.
That's what the deal is. And so many people, they can say you're on house arrest, but that means you can't go out. But you can go to school online. You can take classes online. You can get a degree online. You will not be able to. You're not going to build a prison until somebody stays in the house. They're going to have to fill that bed because you have done it there. And if the prison beds are not filled, there's a financial impact for that. That's a bad investment if the bed's not full. Hey, we're gonna hit the fourth quarter when we come back. And man, Drew's bringing some great stuff. It's First and 45 with Coach Fitz. Thank you for tuning in with me. If you want to read more of this teenage pregnancy, go check out my website at firstand45.com. Man, sign up for the newsletter. I promise you're going to really love this next edition that's coming out this summer. Hey, stay tuned for the fourth quarter. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, Drew here, and for the last 11 years, we've worked together to build the Arkansas Dream Center. And over those years, things have grown, opportunities have happened, but we've continued to focus on that mission of every Arkansan chasing their God-given dream. And for that very reason, our corporation is actually known as Every Arkansan Inc. We have two ministries that really work together in tandem to see that mission take place. We have the Arkansas Dream Center, which is going out and we're reaching out to the communities. We're in those communities with mobile trucks. We're doing after school, we're feeding, we're doing all those things you know us for doing. But in addition, we realize that the church is the answer to a lot of society's problems, and there's one on every corner. So we have City Serve that comes along the side of the church, and they provide the resources. They provide furniture and clothing and diapers and all these things to the local churches so they can reach out to their neighbors. And together, when those two start to mesh, we're going out and we're doing, and we're bringing the churches alongside of them, and we're equipping and we're resourcing those churches, we can truly empower the local church with the resources they need to strengthen relationships in their communities. And that's what our vision is for Every Arkansan Inc. And we're so glad you're a part of it. And we are back with First and 45 with Coach Fitz Hill. We've been talking about pregnancy. We're talking about some of the things that as a society I think we've missed. We've forgotten. We're not focused on the things of God, and we're seeing some of the consequences here, not in our own lives, but we're seeing it in generations down.
Yeah.
Because as you talked about, when we go back to the 1940s, we saw that Black families had the highest marriage rates, and were in a lot of ways more successful holistically than they were even 26 years later in 91, and definitely, or 96, and definitely the numbers have fallen off the face of the earth when you look at now, to where it's 70% of Black children being born outside of marriage.
Yeah, and the systemic methods that has played to that from several factors, and that's what I've been looking at and to examine why. How can a group come out of slavery, empower themselves, build Black Wall Street, all the other Black Wall Streets that were throughout the country, North Carolina, Tulsa, Oklahoma, here 9th Street here in Little Rock. What was the demise of that? And it goes back to the breakdown of the family. And then you take that, and we'll talk more about that. I want to go, because last week I was talking about the economic stability and how poverty, remember I talked about the grocery stores and how a Black grocery store, Black-owned grocery stores were part of the Black communities, and how that was a really a form of life, because you have store, you have food, then you build communities around it. You have grocery stores, you have schools, you have churches, you build communities around those anchors. But in this book that I have, Our Black Year by Maggie Anderson and Ted Gregory, in chapter 3, it talks about leakage, and it talks about one report from 2004 revealed that for every $100 flowing into an average underserved Black community, about $95 leaves either by being spent at a local business owned by outsiders, or at a business outside the community. And it made mention that in the Black community, Tulsa, Oklahoma, located, that's what we call Greenwood, at the beginning of the 20th century, because of segregation, these residents had virtually no contact with the city's white community, yet still generated vibrant wealth. So in those days, a dollar would remain in the Black community for up to 3 to 4 years before circulating elsewhere, as opposed today, Drew, to only a few hours that it now remains in the Black community. Well, that's the poverty. And that's when it went from the neighborhood to the hood, when when those dollars start exiting outside the communities. And then it has another book that I'm getting ready to engage in. It calls Articles of Interest to the Center are From Other Shores, Recent Wave of Asian, Latin American, and Caribbean Immigrants in the Stirring Fears of Displacement of Black Community, that Black Enterprise published in 1983. Well, very rarely does, when you see these communities now, it says like in Detroit, in the Black community, these convenience stores in the communities that were reinvesting themselves were owned by Black entrepreneurs. All right. But now you don't have that to the level that you did prior to integration. And so that money to build communities is no longer there.
But in Coach, while you were saying that, I was just kind of like looking. If you go to 1970, the Black population represented about 3 to 4% of the US's GDP. Today, they represent almost 8% of the GDP. So this isn't an income problem. This is a wealth problem.
Mhm.
And as you said, it's not that the income's not coming in, that it's going out faster
That's it.
than it's coming in.
Correct.
We're not reinvesting into the next generation. We're not reinvesting into infrastructure and to home ownership and to real wealth.
Which we did from 1865 to 1960.
Exactly.
And I'm saying,
But-
and when people are looking for solutions, I'm saying that's what First and 45 in my mind is to say, listen, we didn't talk about DEI. And I'm just saying, look, and listen, I'm a beneficiary. I never would have been the first African-American head football coach at San Jose State or the first assistant African-American head football assistant head football coach for Arkansas Razorback without these intentional, to make sure. Now, I have to perform, but I'm just saying there's been a lot of opportunity that we've been shut out because of the color of our skin. And I often say this in my research in my book that I talk about, if people want to say, they want to lessen the impact that race has on it, because I say race impacts space, and I said, and the numbers will say that, and we can go back far and look all you want to, but I give a perfect example because I think he's the greatest coach of all time, Nick Saban. Love him, admire what he's done as a former football coach. Love his style. The players. He recruits great, and it holds coaches accountable. So all those things work. But here's what I said: if I sit here and I ask you, what would have happened if Nick Saban had been born black? Same person.
The access would have been missing.
That's all I'm saying.
The performance.
It was there because how many people were passed over? All right. So those are things that I'm saying, what if Eddie Robinson, who was Grambling, and done great things, but this intentionality of okay, let's integrate what the data shows us at who suffered because of these communities. And I'm saying this to look at the ripple effect of this to what you were talking about earlier. See, the impoverished communities with these teenage pregnancies that often replicate themselves in a dysfunctional cycle has to be played out from not only, it's not one. It's the poverty piece. All right. Well, how did we have poverty? Well, what happened to the dollar circulating in the community? That's no longer happening. What happened to the black entrepreneurs in the community? That's no longer happening. So this vicious cycle that's rooted in poverty, okay, which then goes back to foster care. All these things that we're talking about leads to this crisis, in which is now black men are the number one cause of death for black males is homicide, and per capita, when you look at the percentage of black men, only 6% of the U.S. population, but are over 40% of the prison population. So when you start looking at that, and that's usually comes from 2% of the 2% of the entire population of the 6%. And so it's that demographic that we're trying to say is like a cancerous cell. We don't need to treat the whole body, because you just mentioned that percentage. We just need to focus in on those individuals.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and you're turning 16 and you're looking at cars and all that. There was a thing that went around that if you drive a red car, insurance is more expensive. When we look at COVID, well, if you do this, and this, you got a higher risk. We as a society are really good at talking about some of our risk factors in the world. This is one of them that I am continually amazed that people are just dumbed down to. When we talk about First and 45, the number one cause of death for a black male 0 to 44, homicide. We don't want to talk about it, so therefore we don't talk about it, and then everyone is dumb to it, and then we wonder, how in the world have we gotten into this boat?
Right.
Well, we got into this boat on the first day of conception of this child, when we just didn't care and didn't want to talk about what could happen. We didn't say, well, maybe childhood nutrition, maybe making sure that mama is supported if she's a single mom, maybe looking at this and saying, okay, hey, dad, we got to teach all men
Yeah.
to be better father.
It takes two.
It takes two. And so often we forgot about what was going on day one to get us here.
Correct.
And that's the thing that, once again, we've left a lot out of the Bible in the teaching of what it is to be a man, what it is to be a woman, and what it is to be a family in our society today.
Oh, well, there we go. Man, what a great show tonight, bringing up these social factors that are leading to the crisis in our community. I want to appreciate Every Arkansan being out. I watched the special day with the young kids and singing and rapping about Jesus yesterday. It just thrilled my heart, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put those seeds of righteousness and holiness in our young people. Let me close out in the word of prayer. God, we thank you for this platform. Thank you for this opportunity. We pray that you continue to bless us to bring light to this crisis. In your name we pray. Amen. Hey, we'll see you back. Hey, Bishop, wave that white towel while you're out there. We'll see you back next Tuesday night, 6 o'clock. Tell a friend and join us. Look forward to talking to you.